This video is a request from YouTube user BunnyGal.
Epilepsy warning for flashing lights and colors.
Rocket rods at California's Disneyland. This attempt at turning a slow-moving transportation system into a thrill ride was one of the worst mistakes ever made by the park. Its engineering failures and the way it wrecked one of the park's most beloved attractions can easily qualify as the worst thrill ride ever. But what made this attraction so terrible? Let's find out today, right here on Theme Park Crazy. The story of this attraction starts all the way back at the 1964 World's Fair. Not only did future Disney theme park attractions like the Carousel of Progress and It's a Small World make their debuts, but another attraction named the Magic Skyway was in operation. Though Walt Disney himself didn't oversee this project, it was worked on by his Imagineers. This slow-moving ride had guests traverse an elevated track that went over park paths and through dioramas. The ride was sponsored by auto company Ford, hence the actual Ford cars used on the ride. Though the ride was scrapped at the end of the fair, Walt was heavily inspired by the Skyway. He felt that the concept had great potential as a futuristic transportation system. As such, he decided to bring the experience to Disneyland. With the Tomorrowland section undergoing a sizable renovation, he figured this would be a perfect addition to it. Ford declined to sponsor the ride again, as they didn't want to support something that could theoretically replace their automobiles. Nevertheless, the proposed Skyway would soon begin development in California. Walt sadly wouldn't live to see this ride open, but his Imagineers still worked tirelessly to get the new attraction built. On July 2, 1967, the People Mover made its triumphant debut to the public. Rather than Ford vehicles, the People Mover used covered trains that could sit up to 16 people at a time. At Disneyland, the course took guests on a scenic ride over the walkways. It also went through a number of gift shops and ride buildings. The attraction was an instant success, with park guests praising the relaxing ride experience and the scenic views it gave. One important thing to note about this ride was the way it worked. Despite what one might think, there were no engines on board the trains. Instead, the track itself powered the ride, with sets of electrically powered drive tires set up underneath the cars. The track was held up by a concrete support structure which ran all across Tomorrowland. The structure was even installed in the infrastructure of several buildings. The trains themselves traveled at a top speed of 7 miles per hour with a total ride length of 16 minutes. Though it certainly wasn't meant to be a thrill ride, it was still a solid transportation ride that was a perfect fit in Tomorrowland. Still though, there was an attempt to make the ride more thrilling in the 70s. In 1977, the park introduced a super speed tunnel to the ride. What the park did was take one of the ride's existing tunnels and project race cars on the walls. This gave guests the illusion that they were speeding up, while they still remained at the same speed. Despite the ride's success, Tomorrowland soon faced an issue. The land's vision of the future from the 1960s inevitably became dated. As for the People Mover, Imagineers felt that the ride was too old and no longer served its purpose as a prototype transportation system. Reportedly, it was expensive to operate as well, especially since the track was exposed to the elements. The issue of cost was especially relevant ever since the initial financial failure of Euro Disneyland. Since then, Disney was looking to cut costs wherever they could. To help do this, Disney CEO at the time Michael Eisner appointed Paul Pressler as the head executive of Disneyland in 1994. Pressler's background in merchandising meant he was experienced with cost-cutting measures. However, park fans look back on his run negatively, saying he relied too heavily on cheap attractions that weren't up to Walt Disney's standards. One could easily argue that he made Bob Chapek look like Jeff Bezos. Maybe. Several classic attractions were deemed too expensive and shut down, and costly projects that were still in development were shelved as well. The People Mover, with its seemingly outdated nature and high operational costs, would end up closing for good in 1995. As for canned upcoming projects, one of them was a large refurbishment of Tomorrowland named Tomorrowland 2055. Based on the concept art, many have suggested it would have breathed new life into the dated area. Though the project was cancelled for budget concerns, Disney still wanted to refurbish Tomorrowland, but at a much lower cost. Instead of a complete makeover, the renovations to Tomorrowland were planned to be much less drastic. But still, there was an all-new A-list attraction planned. According to Park Vault, this ride concept originally got its start at Tokyo Disneyland. The Oriental Land Company, who operates the park, once planned their own refurbishment of their Tomorrowland. The proposed makeover would feature a thrill ride named Rocket Bikes. This attraction would seat passengers on high-speed bikes, and much like the People Mover, the course would be built over the walkways. However, the Oriental Land Company nixed this refurbishment in favor of allocating the funds to the upcoming Tokyo Disney Sea. Eventually, this concept made its way to Disneyland officials in California. In an effort to bring a new attraction to the park at a lower cost, the concept was retooled to reuse the old People Movers track, serving as a more thrilling replacement for the defunct ride. Instead of motorbikes, the vehicles would resemble futuristic hot rods. And instead of Rocket Bikes, the ride's name would be changed to Rocket Rods. On paper, it seemed like a promising addition to the park that would draw in thrill seekers and save money. Despite the promises of cost reduction though, Disney still sought a sponsor to help fund the attraction. At first, Disney sought help from automobile manufacturer General Motors, or GM for short. However, GM was frustrated with the construction delays of Epcot's test track, which they already agreed to sponsor. For this reason, they turned down the sponsorship for Rocket Rods, which was a huge blow to the ride's funding. In total, Disney spent around $25 million on the new attraction. Keep that in mind for later. Despite the setback, Disney carried on with the ride's development and testing. After months of planning and construction, the new Tomorrowland would open in 1998. But instead of a refreshing renovation, the park essentially gave the land a bronze color scheme. There were some interesting aesthetics added here and there, but it was a fraction of what was originally planned. And for Space Mountain, it didn't look so good. On the bright side, Rocket Rods would open on time with the new land. Unfortunately, dark times were ahead for this new attraction. The ride experience went as followed. After a pre-show about the history of transportation, guests boarded the Rocket Rods. Gone were the 16-person trains of the People Mover, and in their place were a set of 5-person cars resembling sci-fi dragsters. These featured rubber tires that ran on top of the track, as well as a separate set of wheels underneath that attached to a single middle rail. On board each vehicle was an electric motor system, which interacted with bus bars on the track to power the vehicles at varying speeds. The ride's top speed was over 4 times faster than the People Mover, going from 7 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour. This made it the fastest ride at Disneyland, which assisted its marketing campaign. As a result of this change, the ride's duration also went from 16 minutes to just around 3. Shortly after boarding, the vehicles approached the straight section where they would be launched forwards at top speed. While this did seem fun at first, the fun was short-lived, as the vehicle's speed suddenly slowed down before the turn. And here was the first big problem with this ride. While the original People Mover track was changed to accommodate a high-speed ride, the layout's turns were not. For context, roller coasters required banked turns during high-speed moments. This reduces uncomfortable lateral forces and allows for less strain on the track. Anyone who's played Roller Coaster Tycoon knows this. However, the turns on Rocket Rods were not banked. Instead, the cars were slowed down before each turn, which absolutely killed the pacing. Essentially, Rocket Rods was the equivalent of fruit stripe gum, an initial burst of fun before becoming a buzzkill. Disney did plan to bank the turns at first, but the loss of GM as a sponsor forced them to further cut costs. Aside from the speed changes, the course stayed the same as the People Mover. However, because of the higher speeds, guests were no longer able to appreciate the scenic views of the shops and ride buildings. Thrill rides are cool, but this makeover decimated one of the best things about riding the People Mover. Sometimes it's nice to just sit back and take in the views. Like, there's no need to make Living with the Land a high-speed rapids ride, it's great the way it is. Still though, many praise the ride for adding some high-speed flavor to the old attraction. Many look back on this ride fondly. Even with its buzzkill turns, this ride was still fast-paced enough to get some enjoyment out of. And for some, this was their first time riding a thrill ride. The term worst thrill ride ever may seem like an unfair assessment based on how many people loved it. But the label has less to do with the ride experience and more to do with the fact that it was an engineering and operational disaster. In terms of functionality, reliability, and design, this ride absolutely sucked. Regardless of how guests felt about the vehicles slowing down for each turn, the change in speed was a huge maintenance issue nonetheless. The constant speeding up and slowing down of the ride vehicles put considerable wear and tear on both the rubber tires and the onboard motors. Moreover, the ride's computer system was finicky. Oftentimes, it would assume the vehicles weren't where they were supposed to be and shut down the ride. This sometimes forced guests to evacuate by walking along the track. The trains themselves presented other issues as well. Since they could only sit 5 people at a time, the ride suffered from low capacity. This led to excessive wait times of up to 2 or 3 hours, resulting in frustrated guests and disappointment that the ride wasn't worth the wait. Capacity was the least of the vehicle's issues though. The biggest problem with them was by far their weight. Despite only seating 5 people compared to the People Mover 16, the vehicles on rocket rods were much heavier. The People Mover's concrete structure wasn't meant to carry such heavy vehicles, let alone ones that went over 4 times faster than the original trains. The weight of the vehicles, as well as their constant speed changes, caused the ride supports to be structurally compromised. It got so bad that chunks of concrete reportedly fell from the supports. There was also a rumored incident involving a piece of the braking system breaking off from the ride and being flung across a walkway, though it's unknown if that was related to the vehicle's weight. These vehicles were literally destroying the ride's infrastructure. It's obvious that the engineering of this attraction was poorly planned, and the budget cuts played a huge part in its failure. Considering all of these issues, it's no wonder why this ride closed in just 2 years. In the year 2000, Disney announced that the ride would be closed for refurbishment until 2001. However, once the full extent of the structural damage was brought to light, the decision was made to cancel the refurbishment and never reopen rocket rods. And the worst part was that due to the damage to the ride's structure, Disneyland was unable to bring back the classic People Mover. Because the ride's path went around Tomorrowland and was built into the infrastructure of several buildings, repairing the track would be costly, time-consuming, and force Disney to shut down a good majority of Tomorrowland to do so. Plus, they would still have to build it up to code with today's safety standards. Simply put, the only way to repair the track and bring back the People Mover would be to completely redo it from scratch. To this day, the track remains abandoned at Disneyland, serving as a reminder of one of the park's biggest mistakes ever. In the end, Disneyland ended up decimating a classic attraction to build a $25 million thrill ride that only operated for 2 years before being abandoned. For context, $25 million is the same cost as the world's tallest operating roller coaster, Kingda Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure. Imagine if Six Flags built that ride, only for it to close 2 years later and sit abandoned to this day. Though those who grew up with rocket rods remember it fondly, fans of the People Mover loathe it for what it did to the classic ride. Overall, it was a huge waste of time, a huge waste of money, and a huge failure. But the worst part is that this wouldn't be the only time a ride refurbishment at Disneyland went wrong. Be sure to stay tuned later this month for that story. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments are from my video on the worst coaster makeovers. Canis83 says, "It's a shame RMC didn't exist yet to fix Son of Beast." Niels Hazeborg says, "Oh, what could have been. El Condor at Wallaby was going to get Kumbak trains like T3, the other prototype SLC, but the park waited it out and now they've got much better new Vekoma Vest trains instead. So now El Condor is saved for the foreseeable future, while if they had gone for the Kumbak trains, it might have been gone. Gee, thanks Vekoma." Colton and Jen says, 1511, "Honestly, the fact you included Celestia as a Vyond cameo makes me want to subscribe to you like 7 more times now." Thank you, Colton. Corinth says, "When Nighthawk at Carowinds first opened, it was called the Borg Assimilator and was, surprise, themed after the Borg from Star Trek. I know it was a licensing thing that forced the change, but I really missed the original Borg theme." And Crossfire Detroit says, "Background song keeps making me think of Indica Badu by Logic." If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read.
Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description.
Thanks for watching everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to follow me on social media, you can check out the links I put in the description. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.